Davina, welcome to the Heroine's Journey podcast. It's such a pleasure. I was on your podcast
You were.
and oh my gosh, that was fun.
Thank you
So,
so much for being on my podcast. It was great, and I'm happy to be here.
so we have Davina Frederick today from the Wealthy Lawyer podcast.
Yes, hi. It's the Wealthy Woman Lawyer podcast, and that is also the name of my brand, the Wealthy Woman Lawyer.
And tell me quickly, what was it in your background that led you to this point where you felt that that was your brand and you wanted to stand up and stand out for that? Something inspired you.
So it started out. I had a career in marketing for about 15 years. I got a degree in journalism and thought I was going to be one of these journalists that like traveled the world, and just kind of funny if you know me because I get motion sick if I walk too fast. So that probably would not have worked out. But I wound up marrying my first husband and staying where I was, which was Orlando, Florida at the time.
Wow.
And so I had to come up with another career. There weren't a lot of journalism options, so I went into marketing, and I did that for about 15 years. And life happened. Divorced my first husband, met my second husband. When I married him, he was in a position for me to not work. He said, "You can go do anything that you want to do," and I had never had that opportunity in my life. So I made a chart, pros and cons, three or four different professions. And I decided I wanted to go to law school and become a lawyer, which I did.
Wow.
So I graduated from law school at 42 years old.
Nice.
And I, my intention when I went to law school was to start my own law firm right out of law school, which is kind of crazy. But since I had already had a career, I was a professional services marketer. I knew how to get business. I'd probably been to a million rubber chicken dinners by then. So I knew how to network, get business. So I thought, well, I can do this, right? I know how to get business. And I did. What I didn't know was all the other things that were involved in growing a business, like hiring the right people and setting up the right systems and learning about finance, business finance, all of that,
Right.
right?
Right.
So my first law practice, I had it for a few years. I brought in a partner. We were really growing. We were making good money. We had a team, but I was really unhappy in that it was working out, but it was working out in a different way than I sort of imagined in my head. And
Mhm.
one
Isn't that always the truth?
exactly, right? So the issue was for me that I started going through, and I didn't realize it at the time, but I started going through perimenopause,
Uh-huh.
and I was working all the time. I had no time for my health and well-being. I was very stressed. I went home at night and all I wanted to do was drink a glass of wine and eat. So I consequently gained a lot of weight and just felt like the worst ever. I started getting bad doctor reports, high blood pressure, and I just said, something is not right here. This is not working for me the way I intended. So I quit. I actually sold out to my law partner and walked away from my first law firm business. And that led me on kind of a quest, a journey to figure out what it was that I didn't know, right? So I
Don't you
worked,
love that? You didn't know that
I
you
didn't
didn't
know what I didn't
know.
know, right?
Like, what, wouldn't it be so much easier if you came roaring down the birth canal and you got a manual to come with it?
It would
Because
be
that's the
great. It would be
hard
great.
part is you don't know what you don't know.
You
And
don't.
you
And
bang your head
especially
against the wall until you figure it out.
especially as a lawyer, because we're trained in law school how to think like a lawyer, but they don't tell you where the courthouse is or how to actually draft a motion or anything practical and useful. They certainly do not tell you how to run a business. And so I knew how to think like a lawyer. I could make an argument, I in court, which I did a lot of. I did litigation, but I really had to figure this business thing out and kind of had to figure out what it was that I wanted to be, do, and have. Being a lawyer wasn't the dream we saw on all the law, whatever, pick your favorite law show that you watched growing up, depending on what generation you are,
Yeah.
different legal shows. That's what we think it's like to practice law. And in reality, it's
And
not.
I heard something recently that I love, and that's that you stop to ask yourself, what does my future self look like?
Right. Right. And
Because I acknowledge there
Joan, I
wasn't
wish I had that much clarity. I didn't.
any.
Because when you're in it, you don't really have that kind of clarity. You just know sort of what's not working. And that's how I felt. It's like this wasn't working. I wasn't happy. It started having problems in my marriage. It didn't have anything to do with my business, but that compounded what was going on.
Mhm.
And I needed to figure out what would make me happy, right? And so I took a step back and I worked for a little while we owned a gym, uh, high performance fitness training facility. And so I worked in that and started getting back in shape. And I started getting involved in coaching programs and trying to learn more about how to run a good law firm business. And I restarted and started a new law firm business. And as I was invited to this large coaching program by a colleague of mine who was another lawyer. And I went, and it wasn't geared toward lawyers, it was geared toward sort of just women trying to create their own businesses.
Right.
And I was like being sprayed with a fire hose. I wasn't even ready for what they were offering. And I didn't realize it, but it was the most expensive coaching program I ever paid for before in my life, most expensive anything. And I really did not get the full benefit of it because I wasn't there and it took me, of course, a while to figure that out. So, but I did learn a lot. Um, and I began to apply things to this seedling of an idea for a law firm and began to grow my second law firm in a very different way than I grew my first law firm. And also because of that, it led me to hire private coaches, and it led me to really explore coaching and fall in love with the coaching world because
Mhm.
it was amazing the impact that it had on my life. So in 2013, I started a coaching program and it was really a law firm growth strategist. I took kind of my marketing background and my business lawyer background, and I said, okay, and all that I had learned in coaching, and I said, okay, I'm going to start working with professional service businesses, helping them develop strategies to grow their business. And it
Because now you're getting to the point in the heroine's journey where you transition over the difficulties and you let your gifts come out. And so now you are starting to say, what gifts do I have and how do I build my delivery and my services on my unique gifts
right.
and not on just some, traditional law firm male-oriented system.
Yeah. Yeah.
Which
Well,
is
and it was really something that I was getting a lot of advice from a lot of different people. And, you can do this, you could do that, you could do this. And of course, I'm sitting here swirling around, and I
but
had to get really
you're
quiet
you.
and really still inside myself
Yes.
to say, what is it that I want to do? So I was really taking baby steps at this point. This was not like I had a big picture of the end result in mind. I was saying, okay, what is it that I have a talent for?
Before you go too far in this, let's pause for a minute and let's agree on what wealthy is.
All right. Before we do that, let me just finish this piece so that you'll understand how I wound up with Wealthy Woman Lawyer. I started my business as D. Fredrick Media and Marketing, and I started helping with sort of marketing strategy. And then I realized that people who own professional service businesses didn't even have an understanding of what they needed to grow their business. And it was an understanding that I now had, right? So I started it out working with different professional services businesses, but about 5 years ago, I noticed I've started getting a lot of competitors in the legal marketing space because most of my clients were other women law firm owners who saw what I did and wanted to do it and were coming to me for help. So I rebranded as Wealthy Woman Lawyer with the idea that I would then, I don't know if you've ever heard of cocktail party syndrome. You're at a cocktail party, somebody says your name behind you, and you immediately whip around to see because we are finely attuned to our own name. So
Right.
that's what I wanted to do, is create this brand that other women law firm owners would immediately gravitate to and say, oh, she's talking specifically to me as a woman law firm owner, which is very different from a man law firm owner or a
Exactly.
non-law firm owner.
We have a heroine's journey. It's not a hero's journey.
That's right. That's right.
You
So
you
back to your
you
question
were let
about wealthy. Can we agree
you
on
were
what wealthy?
letting go you were letting go of the hero's journey, which was the go fight the lions, tigers, and bears, and coming back to your true journey, which is the heroine's journey, and saying what is within me and what am I here to deliver,
Right.
being uniquely female.
Right. 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 And And a lot of times we get a lot of external feedback about that. So it was a very intuitive process for me
It
to get
is.
in touch with myself and what I wanted. And it was very hard at first to drown out all the other voices
Right.
and really listen and tune into to myself. And it's something that I've continued to do. It's not a one and done solution. It's a constant decision about what's next and what's next. So you were talking about wealthy. Can we agree on what wealthy is?
Yeah.
So for me, there's a very specific number attached to my marketing message. Again, there's a difference between marketing messaging and different people having different meanings. So for me, what I found was a lot of my female colleagues had been working as solo attorneys for decades. They get to the end of their career, they don't have a business they can sell.
They have a
They
job.
don't have all their they don't have retirement. I mean, some had very small, 5 figures for retirement from that. And I didn't understand why so many women stayed solo, where you take two bros that graduate from law school, they say, we're going to go out and start our own business together, and they grow it to be multiple million-dollar law firm over the course of 10, 20 years, right?
Right.
And they leave a legacy. Women weren't doing this, and women weren't able to get this, and I would say still aren't able to get this within traditional male run law firms. If you go Google larger law firms in the United States, you're going to see a lot of white male faces on there. Same thing with large companies, white male faces on the board. Those are the partners, those are the leaders. And yeah, you'll see some diversity maybe in the younger associates, maybe in the
One or
younger
two,
workers, whatever,
one or
right?
two out of 100.
Well, and in the 80s and 90s, diversity was considered adding a woman,
Exactly.
right? And so now that's expanded, right? But it was a white woman to
It
be
was a
clear.
white woman, yeah.
And so they'd have the one white woman, and that was their diverse, and she was probably related to somebody, right?
Exactly.
So I look at that, and it just, I said I wanted to create something, a place where women who are growing their own law firm can come together and aspire to more. So for me, I set that as $1 million revenue generating law firm because we're getting, most of them are generating, 250, $500,000. They're not or they may get up to 6 or 7, but they're not getting over that $1 million mark. And that was my first goal, is just to help people get over that $1 million mark. And I still do that. Now, of course, I've been doing this for a long time, and I have clients who get over the million, and then we keep going. We're in 2 million, 3 million. I've got some 5 million wanting to get into 10 million or 20 million or whatever. So every
And to,
for me,
and to,
everybody's definition of wealth depends on what it is that they want. It's not me directing to them what wealth is.
and for me, wealth is more than money. I worked on Wall Street. I made a ton of money. I started the first female investment banking firm in the country, like you and the women you're working with. I had great aspirations to really play the game and play it hard and make some money.
Mhm.
However, I always laugh and say that around 50, I got to the top of the ladder, but the ladder was in the wrong building. And that's when I developed the understanding, and I'm looking for this in you too, that yes, money, no question about it. We live in a society where you give some money so you can do this and you can do that and you can buy some whatever you want. However, what I was really lacking, and you kind of mentioned this, is I was lacking the other parts of wealth. And by that, I mean, I was lacking relationship continuity because I was being too male and not enough female. I was lacking life force energy because I was depleting myself instead of sourcing myself. And in the whole process, I was just pounding myself to do better, make more money, be more prominent. And as a result, my self-esteem suffered terribly. And at the end, because I was missing those other pieces beyond money, it collapsed for me because I believe you can't source yourself in wealth, and that might just be money, without sourcing yourself in physical, relationship, and self-worth.
Right. So in our in what we try to help people with, and my clients come to me, they're not looking for just money, they're looking for what money provides, right?
Exactly. They're looking for a feeling.
So there, and one of the things for women law firm owners specifically, and I would say other women business owners, is high achieving women. You mentioned this yourself. High achieving women just throw themselves into it. They push, they're like Sisyphus. They push that rock up the hill and it rolls back down on them about the time they're 50. Push the rock
Exactly.
up the hill, right? But they don't realize that to get to the next level, to be truly wealthy, which is to create more time freedom, more energy freedom, all those things like that, they have to begin to work
And more love for yourself.
team. They have to begin to hire and develop that support team around them. So when I say wealthy, I'm talking about creating a wealth generating business that can operate even in your absence. So you can be on your vacation in Europe, you can be at the spa, you can be spending time with your kids, you can do whatever is soul nourishing for you while your business continues to operate and generate money without you grinding all the time. And so it's the grinding piece for me that I really wanted to offer a different perspective and say we don't have to grind. I understand what gets high achieving women there is doing it themselves, right? But when you want to grow a business, you have got to step out of that do it myself and start stepping into more of a leadership role. And I don't think that involves grinding yourself into the ground and process and part of as part of the process, because if you
You
remember, I
make,
told you at the beginning that was my issue, is that my well-being was suffering and I
yeah,
had to find a way, how could I do this and create the resources? Because let's face it, people talk about, well, money is not that important. Well, yes, it is.
yes, it is.
It is important because it creates more options, more opportunities, more resources, and more luxury for you in your life if you have
Right.
it. But it is not the be all end all if you don't have your health, your well being, good relationships, all the things you're talking about.
Well, what's so critical in your pointing out is that, and where do we get this schooling, this conditioning? Because I too, I started the first female investment banking firm, but I was the warrior leader, worked my ass off, all that kind of thing. And I had a job. I didn't have a business. I had a
Right.
job. And that's the distinction that you're really making. Why
Yeah.
is it, what training do guys get where they understand? Is it because they play football? Is it, they get something different that we don't get. And as
Yeah.
a result, we want to keep it all at our bosom. We want to keep it all in our control. We want to keep it all under our vision and
Hmm.
not have the perspective where we're kind of growing this thing that is apart from us. Because what you're saying
Right.
is so important is that you're building your wealth in this process because you're building an asset, and that's called a business.
Correct.
On the road, you can then sell that business. And
Well, we often refer to that business as our baby. And that's part of the problem is we are
yeah,
like, we say this is our baby. No, it's not your baby. It's your mule. It's your workhorse. It's your engine. It's separate and apart from you. It is not you, right? And I think that's where you talk about the difference between men and women. I took a women's study class 100 years ago, but one of the things we talked about was how women are sort of taught from girls are taught from a young age to sort of compete with each other. There's a best friend. Anytime you have three in a friend group, it gets complicated because who's your best friend? And what
yeah,
if they're
that's
the other
true.
girl's best friend and now you're left
Yeah.
out? And we play games like jacks. You remember jacks where you like throw the ball, bounce the ball, pick up the jacks, and we play these games with each other that are more intimate. They're more one-on-one or, just with a small group, right? And I do think this is changing. I'm old. I'm an old lady. Like I think this is changing. I think we're seeing a lot more like it was unheard of when I was young for girls to play team sports like soccer, right? And now every little girl, just like every little boy, is thrown into soccer, and that's how we got soccer moms, right? But I think something in our culture creates men to, teaches boys to be drivers, to be, uh, we're praised for leadership. We're not called bossy like a little girl is if she's a leader. There's a lot of things that culturally that have made that way for those of us who are older. Now, those who are younger, it's becoming a little bit different. So it'll be interesting to see how that plays out.
Mhm.
Because also when I started my career, it was in the 80s and the 90s. And in the 80s and the 90s, there were so many. My dad told me to take typing so that I would have something to fall back on. And by that, he meant be a secretary for the
Me
state.
too. I took
Right.
typing and I got an
Yeah.
A in typing, and that was like important. We
Yeah. Yeah.
didn't, we didn't know that computers were coming
Yeah,
down the road,
that's
so
right. We didn't.
typing
I'm so glad. It was
was
good
going to be
advice,
a
but
really
not for the
good
reason
thing.
he thought it was good advice, right? But
Exactly.
that is, but that was at that point, we were still being told secretary, school teacher, that kind of thing. And we were just starting to
Nurse.
see women getting out into these other fields, and they were really groundbreaking. And so I do think that has changed some. And so what I do is really just to encourage other women to expect a little bit more, to desire a little bit more, to say I'm open to growing a little bit more, and maybe my job here isn't the doer. Maybe my job here is the leader, the
Uh-huh.
visionary, the creator, and I'm going to get other people moving with me, in momentum to whatever my vision is, right?
Still, that's hard though. I remember there was a guy who wanted to buy half of my business, and I got instant fear because
Right.
I felt like it could be taken away from me. It's what you're saying. It was my baby.
Yeah.
I didn't see it as something apart from that. And I also had a really hard time trusting that anyone else would care for it and nurture it the way that I would.
Right. And it never occurred to you to think that this business didn't need care and nurturing. This business needed something else
Uh-huh.
to grow and go to the next level. But I understand, I mean, that fear comes naturally because we work so hard to create something or get something, and then we don't realize it's so hard to let go of the working so hard part and say, what if I could do even more and maximize my potential with greater ease without me having to be the one working so hard?
So draw a contrast for me between the law firm that you first started and the second one. Give me some parameters around how it felt different. Why was it different? How did your thinking change?
Well, one of the things for me that was very different from the first to the second is I really considered the lifestyle that I wanted first. And
Nice.
so instead of saying, well, I'm going to go out and do this the way everybody else is doing it, I said, what kind of lifestyle do I want to have? And what would make me feel happy and feel good? And for me, I started in 2011 a virtual law firm, which was unheard of back then. I had a
Mhm.
lot of negative feedback about it. Virtual for me, there were no tools for virtual. Okay. So it was email, phone calls. I might drive to meet a client for something. And I practiced estate planning and business law. So that's how I started it as a virtual. And just that vision of being virtual, I had one male attorney who was many more years experience than I was. He said, your clients are not going to like that. And of course, his agenda was to get me to rent very expensive space in the building he owned
Right.
because he wanted to, so he wanted to make sure that I needed to have an office space because nobody didn't like that.
Exactly.
Well,
Uh-huh.
along comes the pandemic and everybody's doing it. All the cool kids are doing it, right? So now a lot of law firms are virtual and they build whole remote teams that
Uh-huh.
support them. And I was doing that in 2011. So that was a really
Big difference.
huge difference in how I function. I also, as time went on, I learned to automate more of my systems, right? And so in this business, it's a huge component of my coaching business is the automation aspect of it, and so that creates for me more of a this is more of a lifestyle business for me, this current business that I have, because 90% of it is automated, you know,
Mhm.
and I don't need a big team. I have a team, but I don't need a big team, right? And there's even more expansion that I'm doing right now that's going to involve a lot more coaches coming in and working with me. So that's actually on the horizon that's good, that I'm working on right now. It's going to be rolled out in the fall. So I'm very
Wow.
excited about that. Yeah.
So
So
how many hours do you work a week now?
I will say I make a lot of money for working like part-time.
Yeah.
That's what I do. So
And before you were making little money, but working full
I
time.
was working a lot. Well, what I didn't think of in my first law firm business is I thought, well, I'll build this business and I could sort of come and go as I please and I'll have all these attorneys working for me. And I was heading, I had attorneys working for me. I was heading down that path, but the issue was there were two issues. One is that I had all that good girl mentality in my head where I had to be the first one there in the morning and the last one to leave. I had to be setting that example for everybody. I had to be the straight A student, the good girl. I always had to get it right. I had to be that person, right? And it was a lot of pressure. And I was also wearing a lot of hats. I was the firm administrator. I was a full-time litigator. I was the senior partner. I was a mentor and a coach to my employees and to my clients. And it was just a lot, right? And so I switched it and changed it so that I can serve in a way that doesn't sacrifice my well-being in the process.
So
And
how are you doing now in the excuse me, in the other areas we covered? Because money is a great thing and
Right.
going after money is one thing, but how about relationship? How about life force energy? How about the things you're saying to yourself about who you are?
Well, what's kind of interesting is I'll talk about me, but I want to talk about my clients a little bit because people think this works, that this works for me, won't work for them, right? But what has been the greatest joy for me is to see so many women law firm owners become multi-millionaires. But not only that, they set up a business that operates in their absence. So I've just had not one, but three clients on unbeknownst to each other, all go to Africa this year,
Wow.
right? For safaris. And they left their law firms to operate without them while they were gone. That would have been impossible when I started with all of them. So the wealth piece is there, but it's really about the freedom piece that means the most to them, right? The ability to take their kids while they're young and still at home and
Right,
go on some trip of a lifetime.
right.
And those stories are over and over and over and over again. For me, my husband and I are still together, married 22 years. We
Wow.
have, uh, it took a lot of work because we had issues outside of, and part of it is he and I both are entrepreneurs. So when things are going well in business, we were
Things
doing
go
well and
well.
things weren't going well. And he had a huge problem in his business, which really, when men have a huge problem in their business, that affects their identity as a provider and all that. So we went through a lot of really troubled times. It was a few years, but we did a lot of work on it. We kept checking in with each other. Do we want to be here? And we just kept. And so now it's an amazing. I mean, like he's the best husband. Anytime I talk about how he functions in our relationship and what he does and how he um, all the things he does for me and shows his love for me. People are like, that can't be real, right? They can't be right. So, so it's really a wonderful relationship, and we also still work together. We still do a lot. We're both still entrepreneurs. We both work from home. We spend a lot of time together. We are getting ready to leave on a trip this week. So
Nice.
we're doing the things that we enjoy doing and we do together, and it's going really well. And then it's interesting you talk about relationships because it's not just my sort of like marriage relationship, but also my
Oh, it's friends and,
right. And I
you know,
think my friend group has probably shrunk over time, but that's been intentional.
yes, that's okay.
Yeah, I really started looking at who really is a true friend to me,
Exactly.
right? And so that became,
I sent an email to someone recently and said, we don't have to pretend to be friends
oh
because
wow,
we're not.
yeah,
So I just want to call it here and I like you, I've had fun being with you, but it just, we don't have to pretend. She got very, very offended. But the truth was, when it kind of just, I didn't miss it because it
right,
wasn't feeling like friendship. And so I totally agree with that.
yeah, yeah.
You have to parse your time for the things that support your money, your relationships, your sense of self-worth, and your physical well-being.
Yeah,
And sometimes that means that you have to say to somebody, not so much.
yeah, yeah, and I think it's harder to break up with friends than it is to break up with lovers because or spouses because, you there's this we have to be nice, right? There's this idea that we have to behave a certain way as women. But for me, I moved across the country. I moved from Florida to Colorado, which is huge for me because I wanted to live a certain lifestyle that was more outdoors in the mountains, hiking, that kind of thing. And I loved it here. And my husband loves it here. And so we made that change. And that affected some friendships. When you're in the same community for decades, you develop a lot of work acquaintances and things like that. And that's great. And I enjoyed them. I loved them. They were great. And I wanted to focus more on my physical and emotional well being. And those people who are true friends are still true friends, and I
Mhm.
still keep in touch with them and we still do things together, and it allows me to meet new friends and all of that stuff. And I think there's this idea that we get locked into. And when you hit a certain age, if you are introspective at all, you start to really question, is this how I want to spend my remaining time on earth? Is this who I want to spend it with? Is this what I want to spend it doing? You know?
Yes, because the heroine's journey asks you to up your quality of people. You want to get up every morning and just be delighted for the people you're gonna. I mean, I'm delighted to have a podcast with you. If you and I were, we would have a good friendship, I'm sure, because you're
Yeah.
lots of fun and your spirit is light and I would learn things from you. All those things that are so valuable in a friendship.
Yeah, yeah. And I'm at this podcast. You talk about podcasting. So I've been podcasting now for about 6 years, and I did it. It's the Wealthy Woman Lawyer podcast. So it's in supportive of my brand. But the part that has been so surprising and fun for me is that I may not be in the mood to have a podcast that day. And then I get on and
That
have a
is
start having
fun.
a conversation. I'm like, this is so fun because it is nothing but being in the moment and in conversation with somebody else about something I love to talk about, you know,
Exactly.
right?
Exactly.
And so it's really enhanced my life far beyond, making me money and being a marketing tool because I've got to meet so many people, and it's incredible the different experiences that people bring to the table that you never even thought about, the different perspective, the different. I interviewed somebody once. She was like, oh yeah, I collect whiskey and I swing dance on the weekends. And it was just like, I never even thought about collecting whiskey or swing dancing on the weekend, but it was so fascinating and interesting that here was this person who was attorney by day, swing dancer, whiskey drinker by night. And I think that part to me is so fun about a podcast. So like what's better than talking with other people about their life experiences if you
Have you
hear a
reached
podcast?
back to people that you knew? Like I've known people 20 years ago that I knew went off and did some really amazing things. And I've reached back to them and in essence renewed those friendships.
Mhm.
And they've gone off to do amazing things. They just had their own focus at the time. And so we kind of went different ways. But
And
now
that happens,
a
I think.
chance to come back together, which is
Yeah.
great.
Yeah, I definitely had some periods of time. One of my best friends had 4 children. I don't have any children. And so there was a period of time she was very involved in having her children and raising her children, and she was in a marriage, and we didn't talk to each other as much. And then over time, as we've gotten older, having both been through a couple of husbands, and she's had kids, and we have uh been able to come back together as even better friends because we have this history, but we also have something new that we're bringing to the table for each other. So
Our
that's
paths, our paths have been the same, hard, focused work environment, didn't have any kids. And I think the beauty of it is that if we can teach women that you can relax a little bit in the money-making scheme, you can have some other things. When I
right.
went to work on Wall Street, it was have kids or go to work. And,
Right. See,
and it
that's the
was
way it was
so,
for me too. At that time, it was like, well, I can't really afford to have kids because you were expected to reshape yourself into the form of a man,
I
a
call
more
it, it's
better looking man.
shift, shift shaping.
Yeah.
You
Yeah.
were supposed
That
to
was
get
absolutely,
a shift
absolutely.
shape. In
Even our outfits were, like our padded shoulders and all of the things. We were, the working girl, right? All of those things. We were meant to go in the workplace, you had to show up with male energy. And
That's
I
right.
do think that has changed for women over time. I know there are a lot of people that probably don't even young women that don't even realize that you can show up as your authentic self. I have a client right now who is 30, and she has a very different lifestyle than I have. And at the way she shows up as her authentic self on social media, I look at that and I go, oh my gosh, if I had done that back when I was 30, I would not have had the career that I've had. But she is able, because of those who've come before her, right?
Mhm.
She is able to do that. And because of the way the world is changing with social media and attract those people who will be attracted to work with her, right? And
And
so
this
very
this
powerful.
is this is the heroine's journey. It's about being authentic. It's about maximizing all four of those areas, your self-worth, your money, your life force energy. Because who wants to get to the end of it and think, oh, I focused so hard to be a man in a man's world that like, did I just miss the whole thing?
Right, right,
And,
right.
and there are parts to me like, kids are very difficult and you can argue both ways. But I do recognize that I really didn't have a choice because I made the choice to be in the work environment. And I
Yeah,
think now, you know, teaching women as you're teaching women to grow a business within a group, for us to trust one another, for us to depend upon other people's skills that aren't necessarily like when I had my business, I thought I could do it all. Well, the truth is, there were some things I
right.
was good at and some things I was not good at.
Right. And we all have that. We all have that. I also, when you talk about the heroine's journey, and you and I have talked about the different elements of the heroine's journey, that is completely one of the things that I see women do is they say, I can only have relationships, or I can only go out and be this free spirit that lives totally on my own terms, right? I can only, and for me, it's all integral, right? You have to, and one of the choices have seen women making is, if I want to be this attorney that goes out and gets justice for people who can't afford lawyers, I must be broke. I must sacrifice my own wealth
Does a
because
man ever say that?
unseemly. No,
A man
never.
would
It's
never say that.
unseemly to want money and to say, I want more resources and more options. And we say we have to choose either or. And what I argue is, no, you don't. And there may be certain seasons in your life, right, when it comes to children and things like that. I've had clients who have a baby and then hire me right after to start a law firm, and I'm like, this is gonna be a real
No.
challenge for you because is this the best season for this? But for life circumstances, they need to do it or feel compelled to do it. So sometimes it's seasons, that we have in our lives. And the longer we're fortunate enough to live, the more we sort of see that there are seasons. And then, over time, you sort of accumulate a little bit in all of it to get where you want to go. And you get more clarity about what you want and all of that. But I think it's the either or that we that is so um, painful to say, if I don't have, I have to pick between this and this. And it's something you and I both experienced where we had to pick between this and this because the world wasn't set up at the time to allow us to have both. And there were
And
women who did.
I would argue that our self-worth was low, and so therefore we didn't see options.
Right.
Because you have to be able to see options in order to understand that you can make it up differently. I was so busy following what I thought was the success path, not realizing that it was not my success path. But I was so committed to it because I looked around and I said, that's the way the guys did it. And so I should do it the same way. You did that in your first law firm.
Well, I think even
So
before that, when I go back to my career, I really think about my first years working for other people, those 15 years that I was in the workforce with male bosses and all of that kind of stuff. And there was a lot of expectation around how I do things. And it's even starting a law firm out of law school was unacceptable to other people. And I
right.
got judged, and I had some people say some nasty things to me about it. But before that, in those 15 years before working for male bosses, women had a certain place. And when you said, I want something more, it was a slap back down. And I experienced that. I worked for an agency. And when I said, here's what I want, I don't want all this, you know, uh, that was at a time, the dot-com era, when everybody was decorating their offices like romper room and bringing games in, and they were taking us for a field day at the theme park and all this. And I said, I don't want that. I was older than most of my coworkers. I said, I want secure financial security for the future. I want to make a certain amount of money. I want to be potentially a partner in this business. I was fired.
Yeah,
I was
I've had that
transitioned
experience
out,
too.
right?
Yeah.
And it was done in a way that wasn't attached to what I asked for, so I couldn't say anything about it, but that was what it was like. You don't know, you're not going to have, there's no path for you here. And
Right.
and that happened in
And
many.
by the way, that might have been a gift because there probably was
It
no path
was.
for
It
you.
was because it
And
did
you
it led me
and
to
you
something else.
and I, we had to go off and create our own sandbox. Because
Uh,
I've always said, if you play in the guy's sandbox, you have to follow their rules. Which if
right.
you don't like that, it means you have to create your own sandbox, and that's exactly what you did.
Well, and that's kind of what, when I talk about creating your own law firm business, I came from that place of, um, I worked at a law firm before I went to law school. And the women in the law firm business, they had to, there was only so far they could go. All the partners, except for maybe one or two Nepo babies, were men. And
Mhm.
I was like, most people, and in this law firm, it was a big law firm, you were either a lawyer or a secretary or paralegal. That was what you were. So you fit in one or the other. And I was not. I was the marketing manager. So I didn't really fit in. There wasn't really, they didn't know what to do with that. You should behave this way because that's how secretaries and paralegals behaved at that time. Now, not to say there's anything wrong with being a secretary or paralegal, because I've been an office administrator before. I know what that is like. But my point is that I really encourage women to start their own law firms and grow it beyond just you and your paralegal and your assistant working all the time. Grow it to an actual business where you can hire other women and run it the way you envision it.
And
Create a
create a new
workforce
culture.
like you would like to see.
Create a new culture.
Right, exactly. And that's what I see a lot of. I'm seeing a lot of women start and grow law firms, and they're hiring, and a lot of them are very proud of being woman only, right? They just happen to. I think it would be even more exciting to see women hire
Mhm.
men,
Right.
and but I am proud that women are saying this is my vision. And so therefore, I want to grow it because I would like to create this type of vision. And that's the part that's exciting for me, is that they're creating their own, like you said, their own sandboxes instead of trying to please people to work up this path when
Yeah.
there is no good path to get
Yeah.
there, right?
And there's more than one path.
Right.
It's not, because your path should be determined by your unique gifts, skills, and talents.
Hmm.
It might mean that you offer something completely different. Like when I started the first female investment banking firm, they said women can't take risk. And I was like, watch me. But I've always found that entrepreneurism, making money, capitalism is when you put two completely different ideas together. A woman investment banking firm, that was like anathema. It worked. It
Well,
did, it
yeah,
did fine.
and it's incredible that you were able to do that because I guarantee you had a ton of pushback from people. Probably the people closest to you were giving you pushback, right, on that. And now I think there are a lot of women who invest and they don't think anything of it. They don't think anything about, well, that's just what we do now. And it's like, no, there was a time
We
when
led the way.
unless you had the male chromosome, you weren't the one who managed the money, you weren't the one who did the banking, you weren't the one. I always tell people my mother, when she married my father, she cannot take out a credit card in her own name. She cannot take out a loan. And so people think this was in some old-timey, old distant past. And I'm like, no, my mother's
My
still
mother.
and she's very much, even though she paid the bills out of it, my dad is the one who made decisions, and even to this day is the one who sort of is a decision maker in
Because
sort of what
we
they do.
we get to live in a new era. And what you're beautifully doing is leading the way for women to consider their options, to take new paths, to build their own sandboxes, to get out
Yeah,
of the old ones.
yeah.
Because frankly, those old sandboxes didn't make you or me happy. There was I couldn't go higher than certain things. I had to shift shape in order to be in that environment. I was just limited totally in my own authenticity and who I could actually be. And so enough of it.
Well, and we weren't even aware at the time, really, that we were. You know what I mean? Because this is the world around us. This is what we were taught, what we were told, and I think it takes bravery to say this isn't working for me, and to have other people and we don't and I don't think men really realize the level of uh, toxicity that women experience on a day in and day out basis of people, other women and men saying to them, you know, you're getting out of line. This doesn't work. And it comes in very insidious ways. Sometimes it's very direct, sometimes it's indirect. But there's this crabs in a bucket idea that you can't get out of the bucket. I got to pull you back down where you're
Right.
supposed to be. I worked a job in my marketing career. I worked at an engineering firm. And one of the rules at the engineering firm was that these secretaries, what they called them back then, could not wear pants. They could only wear dresses and dress suits. They couldn't wear pants. And I was just like, I was 27 at the time. And I asked them, I said, well, and so what they did is they gave the secretaries $500 as a clothing allowance make
Wow.
up for this. So I said, I asked the powers that be, I said, well, am I going to get a clothing allowance? And they said, no, you're not a secretary. I said, okay. And I came into work in a pantsuit. And one of the secretaries was very upset with me and was trying to put me in my place that you're not allowed to do that. How dare you? Because as a woman, I was supposed to be wearing a dress. And this, my friends, was not that long ago. I mean, and
Right.
it was, but they couldn't say anything to me. And I continued to wear pants. I never wore dresses. I wore pantsuits.
And thank goodness for the you and the me's, because we broke a lot of tradition. We went off on our own. We started successful businesses. We grew those businesses. We then envisioned what was possible. So in both your consulting practice and mine, we'd love to pass that along, because I don't want women to have to go through all the heartache and challenge and difficulty that I did. I'm
Right.
here to serve in a coaching capacity, and I know you are too. So
Right.
where can people find you?
The best way is wealthywomanlawyer.com. That's my website that leads you down a lot of different paths that you can go down. We're actually in the middle of redesigning it. It's going to be coming up soon, the new website. But also, you can find me if you like podcasts like this one. You can also look up Wealthy Woman Lawyer podcast, and that's just about anywhere you can find a podcast. It's there. So
Everywhere. Thank you so much for joining us on the Heroine's Journey today. It's been lots of fun. I wish you well.
Thanks, Joan. I really appreciate it. I've enjoyed it so much.